It's 3 o'clock on Thursday the 16th. Welcome, neighbors. Before we get started, I'm going to ask the president of the board to introduce a new member of the team. Greg?
I do notice that Bruce thought nobody else could speak today because there's no other microphone. But
Sam has it. We'll let him speak.
you want to come up and sing with me? Is that the deal?
Here you go.
Don't abuse it.
I say that.
I thought you broke it. Okay, but something happened this week that we want to make sure that we have an opportunity in a public way to acknowledge and have you get a chance to say hello to our new interim general manager, Russ Curtis. Come on up.
Thank you. Thank you all for your welcome. This is my fourth day at Fairfield Glade. I'm glad to be here. I look forward to working in the months ahead with the leadership team and the board and committees and helping with roles and responsibilities and helping to identify process issues and work towards other improvements as we go forward, and then help to pave the way for the next manager. So I look forward to meeting you in the weeks and months ahead, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Russ. For those of you who don't know all of the members of the team, I'd like to introduce the board members. You saw Greg Jones, our president. Scott Hardema, please stand, that's vice president. I'm the treasurer, Bruce Horn. Barbara Storr. We missed her. She's the secretary and the timeshare rep. Bruce Cox. Where's he right? There you are. Feeling better. And Ken Flerell. There's Ken. I'd also like to acknowledge and ask the senior managers, the SMTs that work so hard to help us get to where we are. Pat Davis, please. She holds us all together. Couldn't do it without her. Bruce Evans, I think he's still gone, hiding out, having fun. Jeff Houston. There's Jeff Houston. Sam McAdoo, community maintenance. Mary Jo Page, marketing, the center and recreation. William Taylor, I bet William is here. There he is. Hello, William. Amber Black, human resources. Amy, who helps me get through this. Thank you very much. Chief Kate Self, Police Department. And before I let her sit down, they made their second level accreditation, the CALEA. This is a huge, huge honor for the work that these people have done for this police department. I tell you, a round of applause. The stature that these people have done is amazing, and her leadership is fantastic. Adams Horn. There's Adams for food and beverage. Now, the committees, a couple of committees that help do all of this good stuff for us. It's the MCPC, Major Capital Projects Committee. I think Dave has already slipped town for a well-deserved vacation. And then the Financial Advisory Committee. Please stand up, folks. These are the folks that help advise us, and we use their knowledge and their expertise to get us through all this. Skip, Becky, thank you so much. Oh, I forgot to push all of those, so you can read it again. Read fast. Now, we'll get to the fun stuff. Everybody wants to know about sewer. As you can see, the numbers here. But I'm not going to have to read all of them down through, but what I can tell you is that at the end of the year, the ending cash balance of all of this from the sewer operations is in good shape. We're right on to where we believe the end of 2023 is going to be, the projection. We have additional capital purchases this year that we'll talk about for expansion and capital in the next slide. But you can see that we're down a little bit in our projection from sewer collection. These things change within the year just because we run into different challenges and things we need to do. The sewer capital, again, we look at the end of 23, the projection, where we're going to be. The big number change for us this year will be the expansion, capital costs for expansion. So obviously our ending cash balance is going to be different. The reason for that, this change this year, is we're adding another pump station. There's a pump station going on at Rotherham, and that's coming in at about $750,000 to add that new pumping station. Things like vehicles, we have $65,000 in vehicle purchases. Equipment, $263,000. So that's all of this capital cost coming in for 2024. This is just an overview of just the fast review that I went through. Regular capital, 218. Collection system expansion that includes and adding the pumping station at Rotherham brings us to about $1 million on that. While I'm going through this, I'd like to ask if you have, or when you have questions, just hold them till the end, because we will make as much time available as needed to answer your questions. And I've got all of these people here captive to take care of the ones that I don't have at hand. POA operating. Looks like a lot of negative numbers. I'll tell you what they're about. The one that's most interesting, I think, is this one. We see it in an increase in our costs in our operations for the fire department. We increased the donation to the fire department this year. That's $144,000 in cash, and that includes, or in addition, there are in-kind donations and services and maintenance of existing services that we help them with. We're seeing increased costs in maintenance, which we've always had before, but this year, since the transfer of land from Tom Anderson, who now owns the building, we're paying rent. And rent is what that means for us is taxes and insurance on the building, because that's the agreement that we have, and we will continue to do that and maintain the building until the fire department is no longer the occupant. That's part of the transfer deal with them. So the number here is a subtotal for the POA operating this year, or forecast for 2024. It looks kind of daunting until we look at this. This is a continuation of it. Now we're looking at the positive side of this. One of the things that we want to highlight is, among others, food and beverage. In 2023 budget, we showed a negative. Our projected is much better since Bobby Jones Links now has been here since March. So there's been a very positive result. We forecast that we're looking at 337,000 positive number for 2024. Headed in the right direction. Couldn't be happier with that. It's good news. Absolutely. It is a big deal. Thank you. And that's an acknowledgement of doing what is right for the community. Golf. Golf came in at an astonishing, like 200,000 more rounds, or some stupid number. I mean, it was incredible. Jeff negotiated that weather for us for last month to take care of those rounds. I thought that was outstanding performance for us. So we figure, though, that he's going to run out of weather for next year, so we don't want to push him any further. Racket sports. In 2022, there was negative numbers. 23, look at the positive numbers. We had budgeted 41,000. We believe it'll be at 63, and we're looking at 75,000 next year, positive numbers. It's paying for itself. It's not being subsidized. Everybody is using this stuff. Marinas, well, we missed the mark this year on, there was increased labor, of course, but I think the issue was we missed the mark on some of our pricing. We had issues that timing with people reserving a boat for, say, 5 hours or 4 hours, and they don't show up. We didn't have a system in place good enough to recapture the revenue from those non-canceled reservations. We're working on that. We're going to fix that. But we've got some plans that to tweak the pricing and the packages that people can use to get to the marinas. That being said, 841,000 is what we see for the budget as compared to last year's 936. Our beginning cash is $1.2 million. Our operating reserve is $5.8 million. Now here's the interesting part. What this says is for POA operating, we've got a balanced budget out of a huge budget. We're less than $7,000 difference. That's a balanced budget. You don't get much closer to zero. We're very pleased with that performance and that number. This one is it looks a little odd, or could be confusing, because of the capital spending. Historically, everybody had their own bucket of capital. What we're doing, because of the need of the facility reserves, or the reserve study that was done, we've presenting those buckets of money to show where the big pot for reserve is going to go, or should be represented. The short answer is that golf had capital spending, and Public Works has capital spending, and they were in different within their own silos. What we've done, because of the extraordinary work of the SMTs and the work of everybody trying to move us forward, the capital now is going into a new, the correct fund, which is a reserve fund. So everybody will collaborate on what they need, when they need it, for capital expenditures. It's just it's a better way to manage the money. Master plan projects for the POA. 23, we wound up with, in 2023, the signage is completed, the center HVAC system is completed. In 2024, we've got the architectural drawings, the site plan for the new Emergency Services Center. Now that means architectural drawings, it means establishing the actual dimensions for everything, making sure everything fits in the building, all of that. The orientation of the building, so we know when the site is selected, it'll fit on the site. Access and egress to the building. Is it pull through? Is it the driveways? All of the things that are needed in architectural drawings before we can build this thing in 2025. The core master community plan study, that's $200,000 this year. That is going to establish or help determine the best future utilization, not only of this building, but looks at the square and the surrounding areas. We believe we can do better, but we need to look at it and get some, establish some guidelines of what it is we are able to do. We've got the police department renovations this year. That includes security, locks, doors, and it'll also include handicapped accessibility. Weather sirens, that's going out now to 2025. It's one of those, everybody wants a weather siren, but not in my backyard. I want to be alerted. I just don't want to need hearing aids after it goes off. But our budget for this year is $550,000. 25, we're looking at $2.4 million. Now again, we're looking at things, every time we do these, it's like we were showing the Racket Center. Things are going to be done at the Racket Center. Golf course irrigation study, the bunker renovations, expand the RV area. All of these things, new admin building. Admin 1, 2, and 3 are getting very long in the tooth. We want to look at that. Do we repurpose these things? Do we look at consolidation of these facilities? These are not necessarily things we're going to do right away, but we have to look at them for the future. We know that there's demand for the RV storage area. What does that entail? How big does it need to be? Those kinds of things. The bunker renovations, those would be for Dorchester and Druid Hills. When do we need them? How much renovation do they need? That's under consideration. We haven't committed to them because we need to finish looking at what they need. Capital fund cash flow. A lot of stuff going on here. If you look at the top, that's our amenities. That's the net. You know, that's the property transfers, assessments, bad debt recovery, lot sales, lot mergers, interest, everything wrapped in. That's the top line number for 23 and 24. We anticipate about 300,000, close to 400,000 in additional monies there. This is the outbound, if you will. We've always had debt service and funding. We do that just to be prudent. As we get further into our Druid project, we anticipate there may be some debt that we will be carrying. In that case, then we have used the amount to either reduce the debt or use for payments or reduce the interest. Regular capital, this is our ongoing capital managed by the SMTs. And that's vehicles and equipment that all of the amenities and all of the SMTs need to get their jobs done under their business units. Regular capital is a standard that we use every year, and we believe that that's going to go down a bit because of the reserve study or the reserve plan. The master plan amenities, that's going up because that takes care of the work that we're going to do at Druid Hills and Robin Hood Park. The master plan projects, these are the projects that are managed by the MCPC. So that's part of everything that's going on with the master plan projects in anything that we're building. The inflation reserve, the facility reserve funding, I'll get to that in just a moment because that's coming up. But that we're going to fund that to $1 million this year. The inflation number, if you look at that $1,200, that's just for the last month. All that is that the rest of the inflation is built into the other numbers from 2023. So that's already there. We anticipate inflation is going to run at about $52,000 this next year. Our net change of all of that activity is $793. $792,000. Our cash reserves, reserve fund, capital reserve, is we anticipate at $4 million. It's 2.5 now. That takes care of our net change in cash for that $7,290,000. But our capital ending reserve, or ending capital reserve, is still $3 million at the end of 2024 with what we're funding. Facility reserve. We're going into 2024 with the same 5.8 million with our cash reserves. We're adding $1 million to that from capital. That we will end the year now with the 5.5. This 1.3 is the maintenance spending that we do every year, and that's not a new number. That's what we anticipate having to spend for just regular maintenance across the board. Let's talk about the facility reserve. As you know, we commissioned the facility reserve. We had an organization come in and do something that we hadn't done. This is the first time this had been done for us, and some people are not familiar with a facility reserve. An organization comes in, and this is what it is. Those are the goals of it. I'm going to read some of the components of this because this comes directly from the consulting organizations, what the components are that go into this work. The components must be a common element or otherwise noted to be the responsibility of Fairfield Glade Community Club to replace. The component has an established estimated useful life, EUL, and the terms that I'm using here are industry standard that to help understand what the costs and how long a building will last or a facility will last, and how to measure its life and the cost of that. So it has an established estimated useful life. It has to be visible so that you can see it, such that the remaining useful life, RUL, can be projected. And those estimated useful life, remaining useful life for 30 years. That's the metric. You add in then the cost of replacement should be high enough to make it financially unsound to fund from the operating budget or funded from the maintenance contract. What this does then is it creates a plan for annual maintenance on all facilities and funding requirements for such. So now we build a plan that tells us when, how much, and the details of this. This study, it came in May. We got the results in August. It took over 250 pages of detail, plus nearly 3,000 photographs, detailed photographs, and analysis of everything that is on this campus, in this community, to look at, to say, and establish a benchmark for the basis of what we learned on this from coming up in this graph. And it's not that we hadn't been doing this, but we had not been doing it in a, I won't say scientific, but we hadn't been doing it in a manner that we could build a long-range plan for and be able to identify the funding needed to do it and leave something for the next board members and the people coming in and moving forward so that we know what we're dealing with, rather than to be reactive only on fixing things and getting maintenance done and keeping us healthy. This is an interesting graph. I think the best analogy that I can come up with for this, that's the $1 million threshold right there that you got to, that's we plan every year. This starting is what it looks like with our existing, the $1 million and our already established reserve. This is what a industry suggests is a funding target over the life of this, over the 31 years here. That's at 60%. Now, there are different scenarios to build on that. You can do it 40%, 50%. I don't know where we are at as a plan, because we're still working on it. We're looking at timelines. We're looking at funding levels. We're looking at what we need to do. But it's like, the closest thing that comes to mind is like your credit card. You can make that $45, $50 minimum payment every month, and in about 5 years, you're never going to be able to catch up, because you're going to keep putting stuff on that credit card. Well, I got to get the roof fixed. I got a water heater. Well, da-da-da-da. If you keep putting, you're going to have to keep putting something on that credit card. And if we only pay the minimum each time, each month that comes around, you never get caught up. And very quickly, you get into an avalanche situation where you never can catch up. We are going to avoid that. We're not going to get behind. We cannot do that, because the point is, we do this to make sure that all of our amenities, everything that we have around us, stays as good as we can possibly make it to get more people here and have the wonderful community that we have established already. And I'm going to say this. Had we done this in 10, 12 years ago, we might still have a Legends and a Fireside. We couldn't keep up. We did not keep up. We're not going to fall into that trap. We cannot do that and continue to grow this community and improve our property values and make people want to come here and build homes and make this their place for the rest of their lives. So this is not a finished product, but this is something to show us that we have to do not this, we have to do more of this to keep ahead of the curve. Now, how do we get there? We have some ideas. The first thing is there is going to be an amenity fee increase. And we're looking at, in general, will increase across the board in the range of 8 to 10% per activity. And 2% of that 8 to 10% will go directly into the capital fund now. It goes no place else. It goes into the reserve fund. That's where everybody will get their money. I showed you the graph with the big the reserve facility, the reserve fund. One of the things that we're having to face is we have payroll and related costs are increasing 10%. We live in the real world. Costs go up. Now, remember that the amenity fee increases are for those fees charged to use the pools, the golf, the racket sports, etc. Those fees are going up. You don't golf, you don't swim, you don't play pickleball or tennis. You won't pay that fee because that's not going on your membership. These are the what we call the heavy hitters and that come in. And we added the actual dollar value because 10% doesn't mean much except a percentage. But payroll and benefits is $1.2 million, almost $1.3 million coming up this year. Liability insurance, that's going up 17%. It's going almost $100,000 this year, just this year, on our liability insurance. Leasing equipment. This is leasing instead of spending capital money on it. That's that. I put $25 on my credit card and pay that off in 5 years instead of, $1 million at one whack. But the wage increase is for all employees, including seasonal. Now, out of that, we talked about the previous slide talked about 10%. 5% of that is the wage increase. Now, the other one included benefits as well. This is strictly wage increases. Merit is 40% of that, of the 5%, which is 2% literally, and the wage scale is the rest. These are, it's a breakdown. Not everybody is going to get a merit raise. Not everybody gets a wage scale change. It will be by individual department and individual job description. We are in a competitive market. That's the reality. If we want to keep good people and keep the good people, we need to reward them and make it competitive in our area. This is an interesting one, the operations revenue. Now here's interesting. What the net of this slide is, the blue is the assessments and the amenity fees is what you pay. if you note that most of the revenue is coming from the users of the amenities and not as much from the monthly assessments. So it's helping to reduce the burden on those that don't use our amenities here, and the guests and people that come in from guests, from visitors, from people that aren't residents. Pretty straightforward. But they're picking up 60% of this, of the load for us. That runs to about each $1 translates into, in 2023, it translated to about 106,000 for the year. In 2024, that $1 increase translates to $110,000. So it makes a difference. So this here is the one you've been waiting for. That's the increase for this year. So our assessment goes from $73 to $76 a month. That's our assessment. Then the lots, of course, are A lots, B lots, and C lots. Note that there is no increase in the sanitation or sewer assessment. So that's our increase this year. That should be an applause, I thought, but okay. So this is the budget breakdown of the 2024 allocation of the $76 monthly assessments. The enhanced services there is, you may need an explanation. That's fire, police, and paving. That's the road paving. G&A, that's what it costs to keep it open. Administration, excuse me. Golf, food and beverage, community maintenance, recreation. That's where the $76 a month goes. The other fee schedule, this is the miscellaneous. You only pay these if you're going to build, buy, or transfer a piece of property. So like the amenity reserve fee, that comes from a closing cost. That's included in your closing costs. You wouldn't necessarily see that as a breakout. But these are miscellaneous fees that many of us aren't bothered with, if you will. If you're buying a house, if you're building a house, if you're going to tap into, or your sewer availability fee when you want to get sewer, those are built into the costs of your new home. I know I rushed through that, but now you can ask all the questions you want. Just please step up to the microphone and give your name. And if I can't answer it, which I may not, but we'll make sure that somebody here can. And by the way, if we can't or I can't, please send a question with as much detail as you want to that email address. I'll get it, and I will respond, or I'll make sure that you get a response from somebody that's got a better answer than I will. Dead quiet.
I'll go first. Oh,
Please, go to the mic.
I'll go first meantime. My name is Keith Robinson. Just a quick question. You said
You got a slide number if you need it?
the amenity fee increases going up 8 to 10% per activity. How does, yeah, 8 to 10% per activity. How does that increase compare to, say, last year or previous years? Is that more or less or about the same?
That's a good question, and I wasn't here last year, so I don't know. It's about the same, I believe. Yeah, I believe, Amy just gave me the heads up.
It's about the
as
same.
Last year, I believe. This is-
Yeah, it's about the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, Bruce. Gary Fitch.
Yes, Gary?
If you could go back to that, like the second or third slide, the one where you were showing the projected revenue for the amenities.
No, it's gotta be further down.
I think you want slide 9.
You mean that
Yeah,
one?
that one right there.
Yeah,
Okay, food and beverage, you're projecting 156,000 this year, almost 157. And you're budgeting for almost 338,000 next year, which is more than a 100% increase. Okay, given the fact that the only restaurant you've got is Stonehenge, and you've got capacity constraints, how are you going to do that?
it's not just the Stonehenge, it's all of the snack bars as well, plus catering, plus,
Special events.
where'd Adams go? There he is.
So most of that increase so Stonehenge lost about $100,000 in the first 2 months of this year. Stonehenge lost about $100,000 in the first 2 months of this year. Stonehenge is scheduled for break even next year, so that $100,000 is part of that. The other part of it is catering and events, and doing more through that, and then also having more offerings at some of the snack bars. So that's why there's that drastic increases, because we're looking at offering other opportunities of income than what we had this year, and then also the way Stonehenge operated in January and February of this year before we got here.
Oh, that's right, because there was the special events at the marinas at St. George that started up those, the special fries, and there was several others that you've had.
Well, that and catering, doing catering for events where people will host an event, whether it's at one of our facilities or at their house or another place, and we're catering the food for that and doing stuff that way. There's a lot of revenue that's built into that as a projection, so that even if we don't happen to generate that revenue, there also wouldn't be those expenses as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Bruce. I think maybe I was asleep when you skipped over the master plan projects amenities. Okay. Would you explain some of that for us, please? Particularly the $1 million down at the bottom and the $300,000 for pickleball courts and so forth.
Yes, sir.
Would you go into detail for us?
Okay. The Druid Hills project is for the Performance Center. And that Performance Center is building, it's going to have currently 2 bays and with provision for a 3rd bay.
Okay.
I can tell you that that one of the presentations that was given to us, that goes gangbusters. We're about the only place between Nashville and someplace else.
Nashville and Chattanooga and Knoxville, we're the only place that you can purchase a lot of different vendors, Mr. Cook. in that. So we feel like that we're gonna set ourselves up for many years to come to be able to fit clubs, give lessons, and continue to grow the game for not only the people that are here, but the people that are coming.
Okay, so the $1 million really is just a speculative estimate?
Well, that's what's in the budget for next year to build that building. We don't have the final. We're getting bids out right now to see what the cost of the building will be. It may be much lower than that. It won't be any more.
Okay, that's great. Now, the 300 for the pickleball courts. First question would be, where are you going to put them? And secondly, the current pickleball courts cost well in excess of $300,000. So is that going to be a budget number to stick with, or are we going to go up to $400,000 or $500,000 for new pickleball courts?
The plan was, we need more pickleball courts. And a plan, a proposal was presented to the board of how to get there. The original ask was, we want to do another 8 courts. Well, the 8 courts are indeed in excess of 300,000. But if we do, say, 4 or a asphalt courts with 4 of them, they can be uncovered and be open. They won't have year-round play, but they can be good for probably a couple of years before they would need maintenance. That goes to this racket center covered pickleball courts, because another option would be to take the 8 courts that we have now and look at different covering options to make them 4-season courts. There were a range of estimates of different technologies to use. We can't do it all in 1 year, that's true.
Well, according to the survey, if I read the numbers correctly, about 75% of our population is age greater than 65.
Yes, sir.
So as we go 3, 4, 5 years further, are we still going to be able to play pickleball physically? That's number one.
Okay.
But the other thing about the pickleball, and I'm picking on pickleball.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I'm going to skip over, and now I'm going to get into the upcoming charges.
Ms. Cook, I can tell you, I've got William Taylor here, and he probably has some of the numbers that we can show about growth, or at least talk about growth. But we're growing, not exponentially, but it looks like a hockey stick of the people that want us to continue playing. And we can still play pickleball well into our 80s, so we're not quite as fast.
Okay. Well, again, if you go back to the survey,
Yes, sir.
and you compare the experience with the my famous pens are getting in the way. Okay. Well, that's all for right now. If I can find my other note, I'll jump up and
Okay.
say some more. Is that all right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be here until there aren't any more questions.
It won't be that long. My name is Karen Gammon. I've been a resident here for 12 years.
Yes, ma'am.
I am a golfer and a card player. I have a couple of questions on here. The gentleman he had you bring up that master plan projects, which was not in your original presentation. That was a question that I had as well. On the Performance Center for $1 million, and the Druid Hills architect in the year 24, nothing in 25. Where are we at for a new clubhouse at Druid Hills?
That's,
The 26, 27?
yeah, that's the, we have to have plans for it. We don't even know where, there's a whole committee that's been working for over a year. Now I'm gathering all of that, getting the requirements of what needs to be in it. And I'll let, you want to take that? Or, let's, you're right, and we don't know, we don't have.
So right now, the spot that we're in is we've got an RFP out to architects to give us some design and to bid on the clubhouse architect. That's that 200,000 that you see there. There'll be more things coming down the road once the steering committee gets all those bids back in and sets and gives a recommendation to the board. And at that point, there'll be more information coming out.
There was a something that came out a couple months ago, which was like an overlay where it showed that the parking lot was going to change and
Yes,
the building was going to be here and there. So
That's what's called the site plan.
Right.
So we're still following that. So the reason why there's not a number in 2025 is because we anticipate we're going to have a special meeting about what we're going to do in Druid in the first quarter of 2024. Because there's no sense talking about dollars until we have some idea what the dollars are. And that's what the purpose of the clubhouse architect is going to do, is give us some renderings of what the drawings might look like, also give us some cost projections, and then we plan on having a special meeting the first quarter where the Druid Hill Steering Committee will come to the community and talk about what we think the thing is going to cost.
Okay.
Okay?
And I'll go back 3 years ago. We talked about changes that were going to happen in Heatherhurst, and that has sort of fallen by the wayside. So that's another thing that I would like the committees to look at, what's happening there, if anything. And then the other...
Okay, hold on. Let's answer that one
Okay.
next. Okay. The Heatherhurst question is one that's not fallen off. We decided not to do the renovations on the snack bar side
Right.
when we were planning on doing that, which was last year. We're still talking about that, but we're talking about in the context of what we're going to do with all of the snack bars, okay? So we broadened the topic, and that means that we got to have a plan for what we're going to do with all of them, not just one of them now, okay?
Okay. And my last question is, when we look at overall operating results...
You have a page on that one?
Yes, I do. Page 9. The center and recreation, that's an enormous amount of money, if I'm understanding your numbers correctly, that we're losing every year. And I will just bring up the fact that I know we depend an awful lot on Wyndham, but Wyndham guests don't pay for this pool, either any of the pools. And starting this year, they never paid for miniature golf. So miniature golf basically had no revenue this past summer. And so when you look at budgets like this, aren't there areas that you can go in and extract possible revenue to hold down? That's one question, and then I'm going to sit down with this. You asked the question on the fees for golf. If I'm not mistaken, the average has been $1 or $2. There was 1 year that we added another $1 because it was for the pay for the GPSs in the golf carts. So I think the most we ever had was $3, and we're looking here at probably, if my math is correct, it would be $4.10 at 10%, or $5 a round. That's a lot of money. For people who like to play 2 or 3 times a week, it adds up. So that's the end of my questions.
Thank you.
I want to follow up on the center question that she just brought up. I mean, I know this has been losing about $500,000 a year, which is a substantial amount. But why is it in next year we're anticipating an additional $130,000 loss?
That is substantially take care of the labor costs that have gone up, and let me go to number 9. It's mostly labor. It's a significant increase in labor. You're absolutely right.
That's just, and by the way, Ted Landers, I forgot to mention my name earlier. That just seems like an awful lot of money. So, I have a couple questions for you.
Just a moment.
Oh, sorry.
That includes, I was reminded that there was an additional charges because of in the swimming pools, we have to have lifeguards. You have to pay for that. That's a cost that we hadn't had before, certainly before my time. And that's state law.
I do want to commend the board for the dramatic improvement with Bobby Legs Jones and the food beverage. I mean, it was a tremendous difference going from a $26,000 deficit to $234,000. So really, you're looking at, I don't know, almost $350,000 or something difference, right? Somewhere in there, turnaround. That's huge. I have a question about the capital reserve. I understand reserve operations. I've done them in all the townhome associations. Why are we taking, so capital is supposed to be for your existing structures, and it is for replacing them at the end of their useful life. It is not supposed to be for doing new structures. And we're taking $1 million out of capital for the new golf performance center. Why are we taking money out of capital when that shouldn't be from there?
Hi, Ted. That $1 million is actually going into what we're calling the facility reserve, which is your reserve study. That is the maintaining of the buildings. That is a separate capital. So you're actually funding it out of the revenue that you're generating for capital reserves. That capital reserves, you're getting it from your assessments, your amenity reserve fee. This year, we're adding 2% of all amenity revenue goes into the capital fund. And they have decided that $1 million of that revenue is now allocated to that facility reserve. That performance center is actually being funded from what's left over. So there's two different buckets now. Is that making any sense?
Well, you're still originally taking out of the capital, though. The capital is supposed to be just for existing structures.
The capital revenue is, there's only one or two places you can get that revenue. They have decided from that revenue, they're allocating it into the two different buckets.
All right, so can we go to slide 17? So the bucket on the far left there, the first one through the dotted line, that is, I believe that's supposed to be $5.2 million, but now you've moved $1 million out, so that's less?
No, you're going to start 2024 with $5.8 million in the facility reserve. In 24, you're going to add $1 million to it. So that brings you to the 6.8. However, you're going to project to spend 1.3 million. If you continue to only fund $1 million every year based on the replacement value and the useful life of our existing buildings, you're going to be in the deficit in 2031.
And I'm absolutely in favor of getting up to, I think the 60% should only be a starting point for funding, and it should be higher. Where we were 100% fully funded for all of our stuff. when you have a roof and the roof is good for 20 years and replace your roof, you can't just replace 60% of it. You have to replace the whole thing. So we really ought, the goal, and I understand there's short-term and longer-term goals, and I understand the short-term goal is to get to 60%.
Right, the board is still reviewing what do they want to fund, what percentage. That 60% is what the industry average is. That's where the chart is coming from, is the industry, but the board has not made their decision on what they want to fund and how soon do they want to fund it.
Ted, the process now, again, this is the first time we've done this, but now we have a process in place that every year we revisit this on a 5-year rollout each time, so that we're trying to look at 5 years ahead each time. Some years, like even in that industry standard line, there's fluctuations in. Some of it's going to be, sometimes we're going to have a great year, and sometimes we're going to have a bad year. This is not a static exercise.
Well, right now, the way it shows, when you get to, and I think that's 3031, I can't quite read it from here,
Yeah.
but the one that goes below the line,
Correct.
that would be $17 million if it were 100% funded at that point.
Let me say something, okay? As Amy said, there's two numbers the board have not decided on. What the funding level is, what percent that is, and what year we want to achieve it. But this slide is only showing that if we only continue to do $1 million a year, every year, we're going to be short. So the question is, if you do an industry standard, let's just use that as an example, Ted, it may be a different percent, okay, we haven't
Yeah.
decided. But if we needed to get to that 60%, what year do we want to get there? Because wherever that year gets into somewhere here, you've got to have the funding mechanism to get to that point, so you've got a 60% amount going forward.
I agree.
So those are the two questions that have not been answered. And until we get together and answer those questions, what year do you want to have it funded at 60%, if that's the number, and what the actual percentage is you want to fund it at? Now, what I will say, and it may have been different in your townhome association, okay, but what we've heard from our consultants is you probably don't want to be at 100%. Very few, if anybody, many people do that. Because the fluctuations that you have, you don't have to do that all the time. And to clear up one other misconception possibly, is the reserve study is not new construction usually. It's the maintenance and caring for the buildings you already have. New construction, just like Amy explained, will come out of the regular capital because we're going to construct buildings from here, there, and everywhere, and we'll have to fund that different ways than we would the reserve study. Okay? That help?
It does. And then there's the one towards the end, and I'm afraid I don't have the number for it. It was towards the end, and it was the one that listed the 3 major increases, POA, amenities explained, I think is the title of it.
That one?
Yes.
Okay.
So those are all recurring things every year. It's not a one-off for those. That totals, if my math is right, $1,605,000.
Yeah.
That's brand new expense for this year. You had mentioned that a $1 increase equals $110,000 in additional revenue, correct? Currently?
Yeah.
So 3% gets us to $330,000, but we've just incurred ongoing this year and every year forward increases of $1.6 million. So we're $1.3 million short of covering the expenses that occurred this year. Is that not correct?
But then that doesn't anticipate that we're going to do that level of increase every year. We've had years that we didn't increase that at all. But this is the increase this year that we're seeing.
Okay.
I mean,
But we're not close to covering that. I mean, we're eating into our monies we've already collected, correct, to do this?
No, hold on. I'm trying to find the slide for you, Bruce.
yeah.
Can you go to slide 9? Okay, Ted, so that one slide does show approximately 1.6 million that you just referenced with the payroll and the leasing and that kind of a thing. What you're seeing, the POA amenities combined, a negative 6,847. That isn't essentially a balanced budget. That means that the revenue and the expenses are balancing out. So while the $3 increase does generate 330,000 of additional revenue, the SMT's improved processes and managing their operations is covering the balance of that in order to get to that balanced budget. So we're not in a deficit except for $6,800. You have a balanced budget, meaning our revenue and our expenses are equaling out to zero.
Okay, so there's things getting into a play there that are not evident in the slides. Without your explanation, we wouldn't have known that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what the balanced budget is doing. That's what the board challenged us to do, is to come up with a balanced budget within some thresholds. So your amenity revenue has gone up. We've raised the capital in places. You have additional, this year you do have additional leases in there because we are actually going to lease instead of buy the capital. So that was increased cost, especially in the golf department. However, we have made some modifications and put some efficiencies in to cover those additional costs to get you to that balanced budget with only a $3 increase.
Okay. And lastly, on slide 12, you were talking about 2% of the amenity fee was going to go to capital. Is that 2% of gross or 2% of net? Because 2% of net is like $25,000 if my math is correct.
It's 2% of gross. It's approximately $200,000.
That's great news. I like that. Thank you.
Bruce?
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Tom Ratcliffe. First, I want to take the opportunity to thank you and the new board leadership for delivering on your promise to get this information out to us early. It was really helpful, allowed us to take and present some of our questions to you, and I hope in the future, as you continue doing that, and I hope that will continue, some of those questions will get answered in the presentation, because I think it'll help us understand more.
Well, as long as we can get them early, that helps.
Absolutely. So really, as I reviewed the presentation over the last week, I had a strong revelation, and that was, the questions that we're going to ask here, at the end of the day, we're really not going to have any impact on the final budget. What it's going to do, I believe, is educate us as members. And so hopefully, as educated members on how our budgets work, we become more informed, hoping then that the leadership, along with the membership, is going to allow us, with that increased level of knowledge, to have a better understanding of how we spend our money and what projects are important towards the capital. That's what I'm hoping in the future. But having said that, it's also going to be incumbent on some transparency and some honesty on providing us information. So I'd like you to go to slide 8, if you would, please. Yes. So I'm confused a little bit. Admin, there are positive numbers. Mm-hmm. All the other departments are negative numbers. What does that mean? Why is one positive and why is one negative? I understand.
Well, I've got some notes here on that.
Wait, let me just take it, I'm going to jump in. Okay. And what I'm going to jump in is to tell you, in the past, we kind of did it, which would make sense. We put revenue at the top, And then we had all the departments that had expenses, we listed those. And then there was a change after 21. So now we feel the need to take the revenue portion, net it with admin, and give us a number. My calculation, Amy, you can step in.
Okay.
The true admin expense, if you took the revenue out, is about $5.7 million. So to run from an administrative standpoint, we spend $5.7 million a year in that range. And I did the calculation based on your numbers on the slides. So we can correct it. My point being, again, breaking it out, a little bit more transparency, and then we can have discussions about what makes up those costs. And are those costs that we are willing to accept or not? So I would ask that in the future, break that out and have the conversation.
Hey, Tom, if you look at slide 21, and admin on that, the reason that one is positive versus the other, that's where the assessments are.
Right.
So on 21, it'll show you the POA revenue is 10 million.
Right.
POA expenses are 11 million. So it's actually a deficit of 750,000, which is made up of the amenities are covering the admin cost.
Right. And this slide actually is how I calculated your admin expense, because you gave me the POA revenue that was in the admin, and I made the adjustment. It's just, all I'm asking is just a little bit more transparency on those slides. So if you go back to, Bruce, if you'd please go back to slide 9, because it's a follow-up on this. Okay, on this one, so back to the point, Amy, that you were making, you know, those revenues, we have the combined of the POA and amenities, $694 for 2023, the projected, and then the if you will, zero-based, or the minus $6,800. On this particular slide, it includes, if I'm not mistaken, in 2024, it includes the amenity income that's going to be, I'm sorry, it includes the assessment increase. And in 2023, it also included that assessment increase. According to what Bruce Cox told us last year, $326,000 in fee increase is what we had. So go back to the 555 positive. We had more income. It includes the assessment increase last year, $300-some thousand. So we were better, we're adjusting our projection, we were better by roughly $200,000 over last year. And yet, last year, we pointed to an extraordinary cost. Bruce Cox told us we had to raise assessments because we had $1.9 million in additional cost. Well, if you look at where we trend, we didn't have to do that. Now you're telling us not quite as bad, but we're going to have to increase assessments to take and reinforce our budget. And my suggestion to you is I'm not really sure we have to, because we have a history of exceeding these projections. And we don't carry over that money. It goes into this, you're noting it as an operating reserve, or excuse me, a net income, but it'll ultimately end up in this operating reserve. It'll be funded, it'll go into something else later on as the board moves money. My long point to that, and probably a little confusing, is all I'm asking for is, if we have to, I know we have to raise assessments, But let's call the raise out to where it should go. Don't call it that we have to cover operating costs, because we don't have to. If we need it for reserve, put it in there. If we need it for capital, earmark it for that. But just don't take and tell us right away, we need it for the operations because here are the expense increases, because we really don't. A final point on that. You're showing 2023 as finishing at $556,000. We've got a very, I'll call it unstable history of that number changing between now and the end of the year. Sometimes dramatically. 2021, I believe, was over $1 million it changed from this meeting till the end of the year. Last year, we showed 54,000 as being that number. By the end of the year, it was 328,000. Again, and I'm asking for this, are we being realistic? And we're basing a lot of these decisions on how we raise assessments, how we raise amenity fees, and so forth. And I'd just like you to be transparent with us. Thank you.
Well, I'm confused. I don't know there was a question. Oh, okay. Yes, sir.
Steve Ducro, I have a question and a comment. The question would be, is there going to be a desilting program for 2024?
There's the guy.
There we go. I submitted in the budget for desilting to start in 2024. Originally, it was scheduled for 2025 and 2026. For certain circumstances, based on recommendations by various committees and things of this nature, they wanted to pull it forward to 2024 and 2025. Currently, that is in the budget for 2024 to begin in 2024, late 2024, in order to allow us to carry it over into 2025 and split it up over 2 fiscal years. In preparation for that, the contractor has come out. I'm waiting for a report for him on how much desilting we have to do, where that desilting's got to be done, and what the total cost is. So currently it is in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, for 2024 and 2025. Okay.
All right, thank you. The comment I have on the RV storage, I appreciate that, but the reality of it is I hate to commit capital funds where a third party could do that. I mean, I see RV storage on Peavine, in Crossville and whatever. And so where third parties can put their capital dollars in, we should let them do it. I mean, this is a specialty type thing, and rather than putting general capital in a very niche type program, doesn't make sense to me.
And that's why it's being looked at, because it's a revenue generator for us as well. Now, if it makes sense, yes, we haven't allocated money for it. We got to look at it. You're absolutely right. The business case has to be there. And they're building them so fast we couldn't keep up anyway. But none of that is a done deal, but we have to look at it because we've had requests and we have people waiting in line to store it on property. That's a preference for individuals that may want to do that. But I appreciate the comment. You're absolutely right. You have to make the business case for what we want to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gary.
Hi, Bruce. I want to follow up a little bit on this facilities reserve that was talked about a few minutes ago. If I heard Amy correctly, she was saying that the 2% is going to amount to about $200,000 this year. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
my point is, when I look around here, I mean, as you pointed out, Legends or Druid is 50 years old.
Right.
This building, Heatherhurst, Stonehenge are all over 30 years old. The newest building we've got is Dorchester, which is about 10 years old at this point.
Yeah, that's about right.
So my question is, I don't know that 2% is realistic. I mean, we're going to be spending a lot of money on maintenance of buildings that are pretty old at this point. And I understand, I mean, and you mentioned this earlier, I mean, you inherited this problem. It's not.
Oh, well, and it's, you know, that's one of those things, that's why, I mean, we should be glad that we did this, so we know where we're at, so we can at least address it, because you're absolutely right, we didn't know what was going on until we had this outfit come in and say, this board was smart enough to at least ask the question. Don't necessarily like the answer, but we got an answer and then we've got something to work with. And it's not that we haven't been doing a whole lot of work, but this helps focus who needs to do what, where, and when, and build a plan around that that says, oh my gosh, you know, we do need more, and we are going to have to find more money, and it is going to cause us some heartburn. So we appreciate that. It wasn't a pleasant thing to see. I mean, I went through most of those photographs, and it was like, I don't want to see that. It just makes me want to go do something else.
Yeah.
You know. So, but it is a work in progress, and this is the baseline for what we have to do, and we'll start seeing this every year. This isn't going to change.
Well, I guess I think, and for the residents, is more than you guys. I think you guys are aware of this, but I'm thinking that 2% is a bare minimum, that we're probably looking at more.
Well, and it's a community problem. It's all of us. We're all in this together on this, because it affects our future. If we don't do things, then the whole point of trying to get people build 100+ homes here every year is not sustainable if we don't keep this stuff up. That means our property values go down. It means that we don't enjoy the life that we have here. You're absolutely right. It's serious business.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with the point. I mean, I understand where we're coming from. I'm just saying that I think it's going to be more expensive than what we're saying right today.
Well,
let me come back here, because I want to be clear about this again. If you go back to the reserve study slide, the 2% is not targeted to the reserve study. Okay? That's a separate conversation. As I said before, there's two numbers the board has to come up with. Thank you.
There's two numbers the board has to come up with. One is, what level of funding do you want? And number two, what year do you want to get there? Yep. You can do 2% till the cows come home, and you look at that line, that's not going to get you to the funding level, okay? So you're absolutely right. There will be a further discussion about the reserve study once we figure out what level, what year, and then we're going to have to come back to the community and explain what that means, okay? But you're absolutely right. 2% will not get us to the reserve study levels we need, and it's not intended to. That's capital dollars that may be used for a wide variety of things. The reserve study piece will be a separate thing, okay? So, and we don't have the answer to that yet, but we need to come up with it, okay?
Okay, I understand.
All right.
One quick, really simple question for you, Bruce.
No.
I know you're going to publish this slideshow. Will you also publish the budget in a financial statement format the way the monthly statements are?
I'm not sure I understand. Go ahead. The first answer is, yes, that's already available to you.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the second?
The second question is, what I'm looking for is to see the budget laid out the way we lay out our financial statements.
The monthly financials.
The monthly financials.
I don't have, don't we do that now?
We've never, the only thing we've ever seen on the budget prior to this year is this slideshow.
Monthly that we good question. And I don't have an answer right this second for you. So I will get back to you. How's that?
Okay, that's fine.
Last question, Ted Landers. We know that we've got the big expense for the Emergency Services Center, which is $2.25 million. We know we've got Druid coming up, and even though it's a couple years in the future, it's easily $3 to $5 million for this. Now, there's no hard numbers anywhere, but we all know it's not going to be inexpensive, right? So we should be thinking about getting an increase in the dues in order to go towards those two projects to pay for them. Because I don't know how we're going to pay for all of that plus the deficit that we have for the reserve study. So I think rather than do the minimum, we need to do the minimum and something more.
We have, there will be that discussion, there has to be. The challenge is that there are a multitude of ways to get there. And we have 10,000 people, almost 10,000 people here in this community that have to help with that. And we have to look carefully at how we get there, when we get there, with all of that. It's not an easy answer, I agree.
Well, we're going to pay for it one way or the other.
You're absolutely correct.
So the easier way is to pay a little bit every year rather than some big amount down the road. And with the high interest rate situation, I'm really not in favor of taking out a loan to pay for it when we can self-pay, which is a less expensive way.
You know, there was a conversation earlier, that we would have looked like geniuses if we would have taken about $10 million out in loans a few years ago when the rates were 3%, and we were still living off of that money now on interest of what we were able to build. We would look brilliant. This is 2023, we're looking at 2024, and you're right, the rates are higher. When is a good time to do things like that? It's a hard question.
Nico Sergio, referring back to his question, under the MOU, it was my understanding, the MOU that we have with Fairfield Glade Homes, Land, Tennessee, and Tom Anderson, my understanding was that he was going to finance the EMS building, and we were going to have a lease for 10 or 15 years. So I'm kind of confused by his comment. And can we get a copy of the final agreement that we have with Tom Anderson?
Well, I don't think that was correct in the MOU, but go ahead.
Let me speak to that a little bit. That was one of the options in the letter. The community has not decided they'd take up that option or not. We have other options to get that funding. It's not just from the developer. So that's what we're doing, Nico. There's nothing in there that says we have to do that, and it's completely our decision, and we have not made that. For obvious reasons, you look what's happening in the markets and everything, we don't know what the deal would be from him. There's nothing in there that even talks about the terms and conditions of that. So that is strictly something that was an option, and we have not even looked at that option yet, okay? The other thing, Ted, I want to come back to your comment just for a second. One of the things that everyone needs to understand in the community is how assessments work. When we assess $1, when we go up $1, by the restrictions in our CNRs that we have, we can only take 25 cents of that to go to capital, no more. So if we go up, $1, you get 25 cents of that in capital. The capital needs that we have are very different than what you can do without raising assessments an astronomical number. And the fact of the matter is that we don't have an O&M problem. Tom, I think you spoke a little bit to that. But the fact is we do have a capital issue. Now, that's what's taking some time because we've got to work through what's the best way to solve that. And there's options open up to us. I'm not saying that it's not a solvable number, but it may be different ways than what we've had to do in the past, and because you're not going to get it through assessments. Because all we would do is if we tried to do it through assessments is we create a larger O&M problem without really solving the capital problem. So you got to understand how we are allowed to raise funds here before you really try to decide, well, it's easier just to go up $4 or $5 a month in assessments, because that's fine, but you're only going to get if you go up 4, you're only going to get 1 on capital. The rest, by our rules and regulations, has to go to O&M. Okay? So I just wanted to clear that up. All right?
So our total budget is 20, sorry.
That's very.
Our
very
total
important.
budget is $25 million, so technically, we could put $6 million away per year, correct? Isn't that what our budget is 25 million?
Are different than assessments. Budgets include fees as well. So when you're talking about, and there's a slide in there that shows the revenues that we're expecting from golf and things like that, those are strictly however we want to use the funds. But as you can see, we use most of those to offset the costs for the other things that we do. So a lot of those dollars go to O&M. All right. So you can't take a look at 25 million and say, well, just take 6 million out of that a year, because if you do that math, you've got to fund the 6 million out of something else. It's not free.
I understand that, but I'm just saying that being able to fund the reserve is not as big an issue. It just means you have to raise assessments in order to be able to do it.
No, that's
Right?
not true.
No?
It's going to be an issue because, like I said, if you just do assessments, you get 25 cents on the dollar. $25 million, our total budget, includes fees, assessments, and any other revenue source that we have. You can only look at how much we raise in assessments to figure out, well, how much can you get out of that a year?
Okay, so what's our total assessment portion then?
It's on one of the slides here.
Just,
So, and she's right, that's not perfect, but you take the 10 million, now that's what you're talking about in close to being what you can take out 25% of. Okay?
$500,000 then, potentially. Give or take.
Give or take.
Bruce, this will be a question. Can you help us by, as I'm trying to wrap my head around this, we're going to have 3 buckets of capital. We're going to have operating capital, we're going to have the facility reserve capital bucket, and we're going to have the capital reserve bucket. 3, right?
Okay.
Is that?
2.
Well, on that, go back to slide 9.
Okay.
There's the operating reserve. So if I'm picturing this right, you got the operating reserve. That's where you can flow money into from, excess that we have and so forth. And then from the operating reserve, that can dole out into the facility reserve, I'm assuming, or the capital reserve. So that's a funding bucket, those 3 buckets. And then you're going to have certain fees that are going to go into the facility reserve bucket. And you're going to have certain fees that are going to go into the capital bucket, right? Like the capital bucket's going to get the thing for the amenity fees, okay? And you're going to make a reserve, you're going to transfer money into the reserve bucket over here. What I'm wondering is, can we see, if I'm right, the 3 buckets and how money flows into them?
Where's the? Which one?
14. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, Tom, you actually have 3 buckets of capital on the POA side, but it's not the 3 that you're thinking of, okay? You have your capital, which is your regular capital and your major projects. That's what this slide right here is doing. You also now have this year in '24, you're gonna have a facility reserve bucket of capital, okay? And that's going to be funded out of the revenue that you're collecting, which we've already talked about the facility reserve, 1 million. The third capital is sanitation truck. That's not up here. So you really only have two types of that you're talking about. One is for new capital, which is your major projects and the equipment that they're buying in the regular capital and all of the new facilities under your master plan and major projects. And then you have existing maintenance and maintaining of your facilities in the facility reserve. So you can only collect revenue for capital in, where's the other slide that has the, oh, it doesn't have it on there. But you can only collect it from assessments, 25% of the assessments. This year, we've added $200,000 and 2% of the amenity reserve. The amenity reserve fee for property transfers. Those are your limitations on how you can get revenue for the overall capital. Now you have to decide what bucket it's going to go into and where the spending's going to come from. So there's two.
Thank you.
You were standing up.
No, I
but-
was not.
Oh, Ken is going to ask a question.
No, I'm going to try to help explain a couple of things.
Okay.
If everybody will think back, probably 4 years ago, there was no such thing as the operating reserve. That was a new entry that we put on, and what we did there, and what we continue to do, is each year, as we had the underrun, if you will, okay, those dollars were moved into that reserve fund, okay? Now, there were those who said, well, you should give us that money back, okay? And as we looked to the future, one of the things that we knew we would end up needing to do is a facility reserve study, okay? So right now, you're gonna have that 5.8 million as the initial deposit into that amenity reserve fund, okay? And we have protected those dollars every year and not allowed anybody to get to those dollars, okay? Prior to that, those dollars never showed up and were able to be used wherever people thought they wanted to use them, okay? So for the past 5 years, we have been pushing those dollars into that bucket and making it a protected bucket that nobody could get to, knowing full well that we would have major projects coming up in the future that money could be used for as a down payment on a project, could be used for the capital reserve funding. And so what you're seeing there now is that in the past, we always spent dollars on facilities maintenance. That facilities maintenance money now will come out of your capital reserve, okay? And so the initial funding of the 5.8, and as you pointed out, Tom, there will be some money at the end of the year. We will determine how much of that 500,000 we would push into the additional funding into the capital reserve, because as Bruce pointed out, the initial deposit of 5.8 and an extra $1 million a year doesn't hack the funding for the facility reserve. And until we decide when do we want to hit the target and what is the target, we won't know how much more than $1 million needs to be put into there. But the answer to that is not raising assessments, because you only get 25% of what you need. So what you need is a way to, independent way to fund capital. And that's something that we'll have to figure out. And you can get that through borrowing. You can get that through a special assessment that is designated just for capital. but you're gonna have to fund it if in fact you wanna protect, and the whole idea about that is you are protecting the future of Fairfield Glade, and you are protecting your property values by making sure that your facilities are maintained in a way that you get the full useful life out of those facilities. What we will do is that will go into the operating reserve, okay? Where it has gone for the last several years. And then the board will have to make a decision on whether or not that goes, but you also can't move it in the same year that you save it, okay? So that'll be a whole nother discussion that we will need to have here after the first of the year, once we've figured out where we're going with the funding of the reserve study.
Thank you.
If there are any more questions, go ahead and send them with as much detail as you want, because we'll get an answer for you. It wasn't a good job.